Hello there. Welcome to the channel, Technical Due Diligence. And before we start, I would invite you to take a minute to subscribe, to like, and even make a comment at the end of this video. Today, I'm sharing with you the series on due diligence. And today, I want to basically look at what we call a technical due diligence. It being a critical aspect in any project cycle. And I'll just delve into it in what I call a more summarized way, so at least we're able to cover more aspects of what we call the technical due diligence. And technical due diligence basically is a process that is carried out through a consultant. If you are a client, if you are doing a project, for this to be able to take effect properly, you need to engage a consultant, maybe an architect. If you are doing a residential building, you need to engage a structural engineer. You need to engage a geotechnical engineer. These are people who will be able to assist you to carry out these technical processes. And the first level, or the first item on technical due diligence, is what I would call site investigation. Actually, it's the biggest component of technical due diligence, because these are the initial processes that you need to carry out to investigate, to evaluate whether a project can take place on a particular ground, on a particular neighborhood, basically on a ground, not neighborhood. And so what are some of the technical due diligence that you evaluate when you're doing site investigation? The first one is basically what I would call visual assessment. Is a site a flat ground? Is a site a hilly ground? So at least you're able to know how you deal with the the drainage aspect of the water. Because if you are dealing with a slopy ground, it means you need to provide how water will move to the lower ground. If you're dealing with a flat ground, you need to establish how will water flow, and how you do this is also through a surveyor, because you basically now need to do what we call the generation of the contours. Contours will basically help you to know how the ground is flowing or how the ground is sloping, so at least you're able to design proper drainage through a site investigation. The other component of site investigation is a process I call geotechnical investigation through a geotechnical engineer. And basically, this is a process that involved testing of the soils. Basically, is to establish the bearing capacity of a particular soil. For example, if you're doing an apartment, you may need to do a geotechnical survey. And why it is critical to do a geotech survey is to establish how are the grounds. Are the soils black cotton soil? And if it's black cotton soil, how deep is it? Is it red soil? How deep is it? And this process will help the engineer to do proper designs without making any assumptions. So at least your designs or structural designs are properly done and effectively done. So geotechnical is critical, and is both a site aspect and also a laboratory aspect, because the engineer will also take some of these materials to the laboratory. The other aspect of site investigation is basically what I would call bush clearing, because by clearing some of the bushes, you basically be able to establish that whether the place is slopy, whether the place had some damping, because you find some of the grounds that you do a project, maybe a quarry, might have been a quarry before. So it's good to clear some bushes around where you want to do your building, so at least you're able to establish how is that ground without just looking visually from external. The other, very simple, is basically taking a walk around your site, establish whether there are some stumps, some trees that were cut before, and there are stumps that are within that ground. Then the other level of site investigation is basically check whether there are trees that are critical that you cannot cut. There are trees that are protected in nature, so establish whether they're on your ground, so at least you know how to deal with those trees. Then the other aspect of technical, or what I would call a technical due diligence, is basically what we call structural integrity, because let's say a building is in the process of construction, and maybe now you want to add some extra floors. For you to be able to do that, it means you must do what we call structural integrity tests. The engineer must come on board and be able to check whether that building can carry extra floors. In some cases, you've seen people moving heavy loads on the highways, and most of the bridges along the highways or the corridors are basically around 5.5 to 5.8 meters high. It's also good to carry out diligence along those highways, because as you're moving what I call the bulk luggage, is to establish whether your trucks are able to move along those highways. Again, if you're carrying out very heavy loads, carry out a diligence with the authorities, maybe can have for our case, to check whether the road that you want to move a load, whether it can actually carry those kind of. So those are basically some of the structural integrity due diligence that you need to carry out. Then the other aspect that you need to carry out on that integrity is what we call a structural assessment. Basically, what I'm calling a structural assessment is basically an engineering process, and the engineers will go to explain this better than I can do. It's basically to carry out the preliminary aspects of a particular project. Maybe at the foundation, before you do the concreting, you need to do some cube testing, the concrete testing, so that even as you pour that concrete on site, it meets the required criteria, so that even when it sets, it can actually set properly and meet the required what we call the structural requirement. So in a nutshell, what I would say about structural due diligence is a process that you need to be careful about, because if it is not properly done, your building may end up coming down, your bridges may end up collapsing, your dams may end up collapsing. So make sure that this process is properly carried out and is properly done, so at least you protect all these aspects of the due diligence. So asante sana, welcome to my channel. Take a minute, do like it, so at least we're able to make more videos that will be able to educate the masses. Asante sana.